Hello and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. The Anishinaabe Nation has confirmed an internal investigation has taken place regarding former Nan Grand Chief Stan Beardy. The probe comes after allegations of sexual harassment were brought forward by several women who've worked under him. Shane Pasquino reports.
Stan Beardy spent 12 years as Nan Grand Chief, 3 years as Ontario Regional Chief, and currently serves as Chief of the Muskrat Dam First Nation. So far, 7 victims have come forward alleging sexual harassment by Beardy, according to former Nan Deputy Grand Chief Anna Betty Ashley-Penescum. She believes now that it's out in the public, even more victims with similar allegations will follow.
I know there'll be others. I've received a few messages in the last few days with the same type of allegations, so I know there'll be more. My focus right now is to work with the complainants and other possible complainants.
Beardy did not return calls for comment, but Ashley-Penescum claims he hand-delivered a letter to NAN leadership members on August 14th, just a day before the Grand Chief elections.
His letter stated that he was going to file a lawsuit against the NAN executive, the existing NAN executive. It was very disturbing, you know, and I had hoped that he was going to come forward and accept responsibility, but instead there was that resistance from him.
Thunder Bay Television has not been able to independently verify any of the allegations made. NAN officials have confirmed Indigenous lawyer Donald Worm was hired to do an internal investigation, but no details are being made public. Ashley-Penescum says Beardy needs to be held accountable for his actions.
We need to address this, and we need to start working with processes to deal with this, including building accountability. And that's all that we're trying to do here, is to hold someone accountable for behaviors that affected many individuals.
Shane Pasquino, TBT News.
Manslaughter charges have now been laid in connection with a July 31st incident in Marathon that claimed the life of a 20-year-old man. Lee Otikwum Joy was lifted to Thunder Bay after being found unconscious in a home in Marathon. He died the following day. Marathon resident Sheldon Finlayson was initially charged with aggravated assault immediately after the incident, but the OPP announced this week that they have upgraded the charge against the 45-year-old suspect. He's been in custody since his initial arrest. Meanwhile, Fort Frances OPP and Treaty 3 police are investigating a suspicious death. Very few details have been released regarding the nature of the case, but police have said that 26-year-old Stacy Commigan of Big Grassy River First Nation has been arrested and charged with committing an indignity to a body. And the OPP continue to investigate the suspicious death of a Dryden man earlier this month. On August 8th, the OPP asked for public help to find 28-year-old Henry Stone Arnold after his vehicle was located just west of Dryden off Highway 594. 9 days later, human remains were found. Constable Patrina Taylor-Hurt says they've been identified as those of the missing man. Police won't say whether it's a homicide, but they still want help from the public.
The investigation is still actively being worked on. There still is a police presence in the area, and there will be until the investigation is concluded. It's being investigated by our Northwest Region Crime Unit under the direction of Detective Inspector Randy Haida of the Criminal Investigations Branch. I don't believe there's any concern for public safety at this time.
Taylor-Hurt says if residents have any information, the OPP has set up a dedicated tip line for the Stone Arnold investigation. 2 people face multiple charges after a 23-year-old Quebec man was killed in a single vehicle crash on Highway 11 near Long Lac. It happened August 18th around 4 p.m. when the vehicle lost control and rolled into the ditch. The victim, who was a passenger in the vehicle, was transported to hospital in Geraldton, where he was pronounced dead. The driver and 2 other passengers were also taken to hospital with only minor injuries. Police have now charged a 22-year-old woman with careless driving and a 30-year-old passenger faces a number of drug-related charges. A Thunder Lake resident is left to pick up the pieces after the home he recently renovated burned to the ground last Sunday. The intensity of the fire and the fact that it posed a threat to nearby homes and a provincial park prompted the MNRF to deploy water bombers to attack the blaze. The Wabigoon Fire Department received the call around 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. Once on scene, crews found the former Thunder Lake Lodge completely engulfed in flames. Fortunately, nobody was home at the time. Wabigoon Fire Prevention Officer Richard Wetelainen says the building, along with a small car that was parked near the structure, are a total loss. Police have looked into the fire and have found nothing suspicious.
We have some video of the initial fire starting, so we know in the area where it started, and but we can't pinpoint it to a specific area, and there is nothing at this point that makes us believe that it's anything other than a accidental type affair.
Wetelainen says it took 2 hours to bring the fire under control and an additional 5 hours to extinguish the hot spots. Cooler temperatures and recent wet weather have prompted the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to lift the restricted fire zone in the northwest region this week. Most of the region north and west of Thunder Bay had been affected by the fire ban. Outdoor fires are once again permitted, though they should be carefully managed. Currently, there are 44 active fires in the region, 40 of which are either under observation or under control. The now former chief of the Treaty 3 Police Service has responded to his suspension and the decision by the Treaty 3 board not to renew his contract. Louis Napish was suspended without pay in July for what the board called performance-related issues, and this week the board announced it's looking for a new chief. Napish issued a statement Friday strenuously denying any performance issues that would justify not renewing his contract. Napish says he has consistently conducted himself in the best interests of the policing profession, and he adds he's proud of his achievements as a police chief who, quote, committed his heart to the people of Treaty 3. Napish's lawyer, Liz McLeod, says she's not sure yet whether her client plans to take legal action. The ongoing saga over the construction of a transmission line from Thunder Bay to Wawa continues. Thursday night, residents from Shunya and Dorian attended a public open house put on by Hydro One to discuss potential changes to the route if it indeed goes ahead. Adam Riley was there.
School may be out for a few more days, but Dorian's public school was filled with area residents Thursday evening to discuss possible changes to the path proposed for Hydro One's Lake Superior link. The transmission project between Thunder Bay and Wawa would create additional electrical load for the provincial grid. Hydro One spokesperson Tiziana Bachega Rosa says initially the project was going to follow the same route through Dorian proposed by a competing bid from Nextbridge. However, the MNR requested Hydro One look at changing the route.
We have a due diligence to study the area and provide that so that they're able to, anyone who's reviewing the final environmental assessment can make an informed decision at the end of the day on what the best option is.
That route would redirect the line away from Weemet Canyon and onto the highway running through Dorian. Reeve Ed Chambers says if the route were to be moved, it would take up even more space in his small community.
Corridors tend to go right through Dorian, and we fought so hard to get that transmission line up to the canyon with Nextbridge. We expect the same route. If Hydro One happens to get the contract, we want it to go up to Wilmette. It would have a major impact on our little town.
Dorian wouldn't be the only area affected by the change in route. Residents of Loon Lake fear a repeat of environmental issues could occur should the change be made.
Loon's a spring-fed lake, and several years ago, probably 15 years ago, when a contractor went in there and clear cut, that made a big difference to people who lost water out of their wells, and it caused flooding in certain septic tanks. So our real concern is not to interrupt the ecological system adjacent to the lake.
While the route this project will take is still being discussed, there are also other uncertainties with the transmission line itself. Regulators still haven't decided as to whether or not to award the contract to Hydro One or its competitor, Nextbridge. That decision is expected to come down sometime this fall. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Thunder Bay Rainy River MP Don Rusnak is giving up a parliamentary role that he's held for the past year. We'll have details when we return. MP Don Rusnak is stepping away from his role as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services. After just 1 year in that position, Rusnak has decided to resign and adjust his priorities. With 2 young children under the age of 5, Rusnak says he wants to spend more time with his family. He notes the intense travel schedule associated with the position prevented him from spending time with his children and also with the residents in his Thunder Bay Rainy River riding. Rusnak says his decision to resign wasn't an easy one, but was a necessary one.
We spend enough time away just with our ordinary member of parliament duties in Ottawa, so we're away for just under half the year in Ottawa. So it's difficult on young families. It has taken a toll over the first year of Theodore's life.
Despite stepping down from the parliamentary secretary role, Rusnak says he still intends to seek the Liberal Party's nomination to run again in the Thunder Bay Rainy River riding next year. A big funding announcement from the federal government this week. Ottawa has committed $5.6 million for a crime prevention project for at-risk youth in Thunder Bay. It's called the Youth Inclusion Program and was developed in response to the 7 Youth Inquest. Carmen Wong has the details.
The Youth Inclusion Program will receive $5.6 million in funding over the next 5 years as part of the National Crime Prevention Strategy. The funding comes in response to the recommendations of the 7 Youth Inquest that examined the deaths of 7 Indigenous youth who traveled from remote northern communities to attend high school in the city. The preventive program aims to avoid similar tragedies in the future. Minister Patty Hajdu says this is an important step towards helping Indigenous youth succeed and to stay safe.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution to this, but it's really about making sure that we have flexibility in the programming that meets the needs of kids as those needs evolve.
The YIP is partnering with 18 organizations to help youth between ages 12 and 24 years old. The program will support vulnerable at-risk populations with a special focus on Indigenous youth. Over 1,000 participants are expected to take part in the program. The YIP will be present at 3 sites located in the Simpson-Ogden area, the Windsor-Picton-Blucher area, and the Limerick area. Crime Prevention Council Coordinator Leanne Chevrat says the funding will be used to hire staff such as youth navigators to be at those sites. She says those navigators will be critical to the success of the program.
They'll be focused on connecting youth directly with services and opportunities. So that includes recreational opportunities, perhaps some services that may be required, also cultural programming, and connecting with other youth.
The program will also include a mobile unit as well as 2 school sites at DFC High School and the Matawa Learning Center. Principal in Matawa, Brad Battiston, says the investment will provide more opportunities for students within the city.
It's a major step towards helping the students feel comfortable and helping the students integrate into the city much more easily than previous years. We are looking at this as a major difference maker for providing that support to our students.
Carmen Wong, TBT News.
There will be an inquest next week into the death of a miner at the Lac des Îles Palladium operation north of Thunder Bay. 38-year-old Pascal Goulet was killed in July of 2014. The husband and father of 2 girls was outside a loader he had been operating underground when he was struck and killed by a piece of falling ore. The inquest will examine the circumstances surrounding Goulet's death. The regional supervising coroner has scheduled the proceedings to begin on September 12th at the Ontario Government Building and last for 3 days. The inquest jury will hear from approximately 10 witnesses before coming up with a list of recommendations aimed at preventing similar deaths. A pair of familiar faces are seeking the mayor's chair in Dryden. Greg Wilson came second during the 2014 election, but assumed office a year later after Craig Nuttall resigned. Wilson is now facing off against former MP and Mayor Roger Valley. Adam Riley has more on the race.
It has been an interesting 4 years in Dryden. The city has had to deal with an unprecedented amount of resignations from both city administration and council. It was one of those resignations from then Mayor Craig Nuttall that brought Greg Wilson into the mayor's chair. Since then, he has been working to eliminate the city's debt, which he attributes to an expenditure problem and not a revenue problem. However, Wilson stresses he isn't a single-issue candidate.
I do not want to run just so I can get the debt down, make sure there's no tax increases. I want to do some of those things like getting the debt down so that we can get our streets and our roads, our sidewalks, etc. fixed. We're not there, but we're heading in the right direction.
Wilson says one of the biggest challenges during the last 3 years was dealing with the loss of 5 CAOs, which made trying to move forward with several projects or strategic planning difficult to accomplish. But he believes there is a strong relationship that can be made with the new provincial government.
Next year, for example, there's projects we've applied for, some more paving on Van Horn, more paving on Duke Street, other projects that we really want to see come to fruition. Even with the limited dollars that we have, they're saying that they will do their best to make sure that we get the funding that we apply for.
Wilson is facing some competition this election from current councillor Roger Valley, who also served as mayor during the late 90s. Valley says there has been some progress in other aspects of the city, including providing seniors in the community with more options when it comes to housing. He says when he previously served as mayor, Dryden managed to weather 2 recessions without a scratch, and the community has to adapt to survive.
We didn't face those in Dryden because first of all, they were building the mill, and second, it was a major renovation at the mill. So Dryden was very lucky. We had millions in the bank. This time around, we've got millions in debt, and I think we have to look at it differently. We have to start to look what our long-term future is going to be here, and I believe it's going to be in the service sector.
While Valley agrees with Wilson on Dryden's debt situation, calling it one of the most difficult challenges the community faces, he disagrees with the path the city chose to rectify the problem.
I have different opinions on some of the others on council. Their focus was totally on debt and debt repayment. And I've seen our city slide in the standards and the standard of living and just the way we have to travel on our streets and sidewalks.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up, our candidate profiles continue as we meet the mayoral hopefuls in Terrace Bay. Terrace Bay is one of many northwestern communities that has undergone changes over the last few years. The community is home to one of the last operating pulp mills on the North Shore and faced some serious uncertainty recently regarding the facility. That prompted the community to branch out and attempt to diversify its economy. Two very well-known faces hope to lead the community during this time of transition. Adam Riley tells us who they are.
Two long-standing members of Terrace Bay's council are going toe-to-toe in the race for mayor during this fall's municipal election. Jody Davis has served on council for 12 years, 5 of which in the role of mayor. He says there are many issues he wants to work on in the community if given another term, including improving the town's water and sewer infrastructure, and he wants to continue looking into more seniors housing in the community.
We have now a more aging population, and it continues to grow, so we need to look at those areas. And I'd like to finish, or for the next year, make major steps now that we will be moving ahead with the waterfront development, is establishing an actual tourist industry based on our waterfront.
Davis also wants to engage further with the local pulp mill as it provides steady employment for residents as well as an industrial tax base. But he wants the facility to improve on several key issues which affect the community.
We don't control the mill, but we want to continue working with the mill so that it remains a stable and viable operation. And I'd like to see from the mill is they work harder on their environmental issues. There's some serious issues regarding the amount of pollution that they are putting into the air.
Many of the improvements in Terrace Bay Davis credits to a hardworking staff and council, which includes his competitor to this election, Gino LeBlanc. Like Davis, LeBlanc has been on council since 2006. He says during that time the town has been extremely busy and thinks now would be a good time to look at some stability for the community.
We've attacked a lot of big projects and we got a lot of support from the province on these projects. And now we got to figure out where we go from here. What's the next step for Terrace Bay? My goal is to run for at least 2 more terms. If I get voted in, I want to run again for mayor. And one of the purposes is to recruit some new blood. We need some new blood at the council table.
If elected, LeBlanc says one of his first goals is to establish a 4-year strategic plan for the community. He adds the town is open for business and prides himself on one project in particular for stabilizing the community during the upheaval created when the mill began to face trouble.
Well, I think our downtown revitalization right behind here in the lighthouse was probably one of the biggest projects that helped our businesses here in Terrace Bay. And every business is the backbone of any municipality, certainly a small municipality. Terrace Bay has been pretty successful. Very few, if any, businesses folded in the past 12 years.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
A number of First Nations chiefs have banded together over concerns about 2 houseboats on Lake Nipigon. Gull Bay Chief Wilfred King says the 2 boats seem to be involved in large-scale commercial fishing activity without proper permits from the MNRF. The chiefs from Gull Bay, Lake Nipigon Ojibwe, Rocky Bay, Sand Point, and Lake Helen First Nations held a meeting 2 weeks ago. They have environmental and regulatory concerns about the vessels. King wants to know why the commercial crafts are being allowed to operate on the lake instead of Aboriginal fishing crews.
When you're looking at conservation issues, the Supreme Court made it very clear in R versus Sparrow in 1990 that the Aboriginal commercial fishery will take precedence over other users, and subsistence fishery was the last and conservation was the very, very last. So I cannot see how the MNR would allow large-scale commercial sport fishery on the lake when Aboriginal fishery should take precedence.
An MNRF spokesperson says the ministry conducted compliance inspections on the houseboats to ensure no laws were being broken, but notes ministry staff will work with the chiefs to address the issues. King says they'll meet again on Thursday to discuss appropriate action. That'll do it for this edition of Northwest News Week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.